I'm Lieutenant Commander Andrew Benson, originally hail from New Jersey, currently live in Washington, D.C., and graduated in the class of 2011. And so to start, why did I become a pharmacist in general? And I always view pharmacists as integrators. And so no matter what practice of pharmacy you're in, if you're in a hospital setting, inpatient side, or you're working in ICU, or you're in trauma, or you're working outpatient, there's a linkage that's made between the patient and the provider, and all the little pieces that have to happen to take care of a patient. And so I've always viewed pharmacists to be integrators, and that's kind of that aspect of its role in the current health system is what drove me to become a pharmacist. Specifically, University of Rhode Island. So I applied to about, I think, 10 schools, and hoping that, that would help me weed through the acceptance piece, would help me weed through where I wanted to go. I got into almost all of them, and that didn't really help me. So I started to take tours, and most of them were in New England. Went to URI, fell in love with the campus, the academic program itself, the reputation that the College of Pharmacy had. But really, what led me down the path of really going to URI was an off the cuff tour that I took of the College of Pharmacy at Fogarty Hall at the time. And so I took a tour of the campus itself. No problem, was in love with it. Then I decided, let me walk around the College of Pharmacy, and I did get a brief tour inside there. And I was with my parents, and so we were done with the tour, and then saw a professor kind of working in his office, and was bold enough to be like, let me go see what this guy's working on, because it has to be some kind of research aspect to it. And it was Dr. Rowley, who I believe is still there.
I love Dr. Rowley.
Yeah. He was, and him, very excited about his research, but also was able to take the complex research that he's working on, boil it down to a simple level for a high school student, and kind of walk me through it. And so that experience that I had, that interaction I had with him, was really what drove me to make the decision to come to URI. And so it was really the passion that he had for the work that he was doing. And that's not everywhere. So important to understand that there is a big part of the clinical piece that's required to become a pharmacist. But there's also a whole other piece, and that's leadership and passion and drive for what you're doing. And so the faculty at URI are really, really in tune with that. And so when deciding, what to take out of, the educational experience you get at URI, especially at the College of Pharmacy, you gotta go past just the clinical piece of it. And you got to touch on a leadership piece and try to learn a little bit about each of what the faculty are doing and how it's shaped them and how it's going to shape you.
I love it. Dr. Rowley, he's amazing. He does a lot of work for like the BSPS student recruiting. So for the pharmaceutical sciences kids, he's so involved with that, and he loves it. He takes them and shows them his lab and all of that. He's so involved, and he's so nice.
Easy to talk to, and explains everything so clearly.
Yes. He's been there for a while. He actually was telling me the other day that my recitation professor, he had her as a recitation student. And he was like, oh, she's so nice. I was like, that's crazy that you've been here that long. But he does.
Whole world,
great.
Yeah.
I know. So you talked a little bit about leadership. What were some of the things that you were involved in at URI? Did you have opportunities at URI for some leadership?
Absolutely. Great question. So a lot of what I did revolved around leadership. And I think that's part of what drove me actually to look into the Navy. But from a specific pharmacy perspective, I was involved with Kappa Psi. I was involved with the Pharmacy Leadership Society. I was a president of ROCI. So I took on all these different, roles and leadership opportunities that kind of broadened my horizons and had me looking at different aspects of things. And that's why I looked at URI as like a really, all these opportunities are out there. You just gotta jump in and see what works for you.
Love that. Oh, very involved. I understand. I think a lot of our students are very involved. We're very leadership driven. We're very committed to the practice, which I think is something that you need, especially since we are there for 6 years. It's a long commitment. So what drove you to look for the Navy? It's like I said, it's a very unconventional pharmacy pathway. So what drove you to look into a career with the Navy? Absolutely.
So grandfather served in the Navy. Always felt like it was going to be in my life one way or another to serve my country. Didn't know how I was going to do it, pharmacy school was where I went. And then, working towards, my last 3 or 4 years of pharmacy school, I started looking a little bit into the military side and try to get an understanding of how pharmacists work in the military and what the roles are. But then also see what kind of other opportunities, while being a pharmacist, you're also an officer. So there's other opportunities that present themselves as well. It's kind of that diversity. It's interesting. Really, it came down to boiling, I wanted to serve my country, and this is the way that I was going to do it. And so in the Navy, which is great, and it's kind of different than other career paths specific for pharmacy, is that since I've been in the Navy almost 10 years now, I've done everything from inpatient, ICU, trauma, outpatient, leadership-oriented stuff. So it really has given me the opportunity to work in every different piece of pharmacy practice while working for the same organization. And that's, from a pharmacy practice point of view, that's really what got me excited about being in the Navy. Within a year of being at San Diego, which was my first duty station, I did mostly outpatient for the first 6 months, did a lot of intensive inpatient ICU, NICU, PICU training for the last 6 months. That led me up to my deployment to Afghanistan. And so did not do a residency, but I had a mini residency, I'd say, and all those things. And so within a year of being graduating from pharmacy school from University of Rhode Island, I was, at the bedside for trauma patients coming in through the door in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And so that wide, range of opportunity was really what excited me. And so I can boil down, the role I'm in right now is a little bit more of an administrative role, but starting back when I graduated from pharmacy school, I was first in San Diego, Naval Medical Center, San Diego, worked mostly outpatient there, did a little inpatient as well. And like I said, I deployed to Afghanistan doing trauma work. From there, I took another weird turn. There's a pharmacist at the U.S. Capitol. So there's a small Navy clinic run at the U.S. Capitol. So we took care of members of Congress, so the Senate, the House, and also the Supreme Court. I was there for 3 years. Then I moved over to Quantico, Naval Health Clinic Quantico, which is down in just south of D.C. Everybody knows it from the FBI Academy and all the TV shows, but there's a Navy clinic there as well. That the Navy is in support of the Marine Corps. So wherever there's the Marine Corps, the Navy's also there from a medicine perspective. Worked mostly outpatient there, but then I kind of started dabbling in other things. And while I was there as the director for clinical support services, and that's over pharmacy, radiology, lab, and physical therapy. So I started to kind of stretch my way out into the administrative world, and that's what was a good experience. And then to throw another curveball in, I applied and was selected to be an aide de camp for a general. And so an aide de camp is kind of like, you can envision, I guess, the guy holding the suitcase with the nuclear codes for the president, kind of like that, except no nuclear codes. And so essentially, I view that as another residency in executive leadership and executive medicine. Wow. And so I spent pretty much the last year and a half working with the director of the Defense Health Agency, who's a 3-star general, kind of attached to his hip, working through his plans, but also helping to guide the strategy forward for the Defense Health Agency, but also learning a significant amount myself in that time. And so now I'm in a different role, also the Defense Health Agency, and that's I'm the chief of the Director's Action Group. And so that's kind of very similar stuff I've been doing for the last year and a half, but kind of taking a more hands-on approach, leading a team of very, very smart, talented people. So they're the talent, I am not, but they're able to take very abstract thoughts about medicine, include data, and kind of tell a story with it. And that's kind of how we move the agenda forward, both within senior leaders of the Department of Defense, but also for the Defense Health Agency.
Okay. Wow. My dad's
It's been weird.
My dad is retired Air Force, which is why Dr. Estes is like, oh my gosh, you need to talk to him. I was like, oh, I love it. And he is constantly trying to get me. He's like, he goes, just go be a pharmacist in the Air Force. I'm like, Dad, I don't want to go be a pharmacist in the Air Force. He's like, you should go be a pharmacist in the Air Force. And, travel is really high on my job requirements. Is that I want to be able to travel. I want to do something with it. I grew up traveling, and so oh yeah, he'll love this.
So I will argue that the Navy has much better duty stations than the Air Force does. I will tell you that. Typically we're by water, so for the most part we're in a much more fun location. But with that being said, the current agency I work for is the Defense Health Agency, and they stood up in 2013. Because right now, Army, Navy, and Air Force all have their own separate medical contingents, and they're all kind of historically out there on their own, doing their own thing. The goal of the DHA is to standardize across the services, all 3 services, and kind of make a more centered approach, if that makes sense. And so that's what the focus has been over the last 7 years. And so
Wow.
you could be an Air Force pharmacist and I won't judge you, I guess is my point.
That's okay. I'm well aware of the rivalries between the different
Oh, but
branches.
it's totally a fun opportunity though, I tell you.
I know. I think about it every now and again. I did when I was in high school, I volunteered at the pharmacy on base through the Red Cross. So I got to see a little bit of what working in a military pharmacy was like. And I liked it. It was different, but I'm not a big community girl. I'm really looking into hospitals. So like residency is kind of what I'm looking at right now. So
and to talk a little bit about the services, just a little bit, the Air Force is a little bit more outpatient centric than the rest of the Navy and the Army. So Navy has medical centers, the Air Force does as well, but they're significantly smaller. But again, that's what, the DHA is trying to tie those pieces together.
And bring them together. I like that. I feel like it's probably better to have one cohesive plan, especially if you're going from like locations that don't necessarily always have like the branch. Like right now, I do a lot of stuff on the Navy base because that's my closest like base nearby, and Navy's a little different than Air Force. It was kind of fun to get used to a new base. But there's a big like Coast Guard presence here as well as like the Navy base. Would you ever come back to Rhode Island, or do you like staying in DC?
Oh no, I've been in DC too long, and that's kind of suck you in and you get stuck here. But no, I was in San Diego before, and then I spent most of my career in DC, and that's just based on the positions that I've had. So typically every 3 years is when you move. And so talking about what you wanted to travel, overseas duty stations are available: Japan, Spain, Italy, a lot of fun places, a lot of interesting places. So we'll see what's next, but certainly not stuck in DC, that's for sure. And Newport is a naval health clinic as well, which is probably what you're talking about. And I would absolutely love to go back there to be there.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very nice. It's got a great view of like the Newport Bridge. I think they're a little spoiled. We have a lot of URI students that actually do their 6-year rotations at the Newport Health Clinic. So a couple of my friends are doing those next year. And they always say that it's like one of the coolest locations they get to do them at. So kind of back to your job, have you done any sort of special training, or have you gotten any additional degrees other than your Pharm.D for your position, or is your Pharm.D just the entrance in the door and that was enough for you?
So your Pharm.D, obviously, graduated as a pharmacist. And that's what got me into the Navy. As I progressed and realized that a lot of what I'm going to be doing is administrative leadership, on top of the clinical piece, I did get my MBA in the last few years. So that's kind of helped me from looking at things from a business perspective, and also kind of helped me understand the best ways to lead and manage staff. Then I also just about a year and a half ago completed the PMP, so the Project Management Professional Certification. A lot of what I've also done in the Navy is managed large projects. Did 2 very large scale pharmacy renovations, and so that type of training kind of helps you manage multi-million-dollar projects with a lot of milestones, a lot of people involved. And so that also kind of helps me as I progress in my career.
Okay. That's kind of cool. I didn't know about the other one. So what, in your opinion, is the most rewarding part of your job?
Oh, great question. So, it's hard. It's hard right now because I'm in an administrative job. But typically, we call them MTFs, military treatment facilities. Those are the actual hospitals and clinics that we work in. And so knowing that my role in the Navy is contributing to taking care of our service members is really the most rewarding piece of that. So our service members, but not only that, like your father, who's retired in the Air Force, who served his time, it's just knowing that I'm having a rewarding career, but also the people that we're taking care of is really, really rewarding.
So you've been talking about all these projects you're working on, and we all know that teamwork is really important, especially in a pharmacy itself, but I think even more important when you're in a military position. So how does teamwork play into your role?
And absolutely. And so as I mentioned earlier, I view pharmacists as integrators. So that means that you're the guy tying a lot of this together. So in the pharmacy, when I worked in the pharmacy, but previously 100% teamwork. And that's why it's important to kind of look at a leadership perspective and turn it on its head and say, servant leadership is really what it's about. Your staff is not here to do stuff for you. You're here to do stuff for your team, right? And so to keep everybody cohesively working, you as the guy should say, what do you need? How can I help you? How can I support you? And how can I help tie things together for you? So in the role that I'm in now, but also the previous role in the pharmacy, teamwork is 100% of the job, because you can't do anything by yourself. And even from a clinical perspective, it takes a whole team to kind of take care of a patient, just like it is from an administrative perspective as well.
Now that you're so you've moved out of like that clinical role, but do you, in regards to like that clinical role as a pharmacist, doing like the day-to-day actions of what we normally think of as a pharmacist, how do they interact with healthcare professionals? So what is the teamwork part of their environment?
Yes. So back in the MTS, as I'll call it, and I am, for the record, still credentialed at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. So I do practice pharmacy, not as often as I should, but I still am keeping, my credentials up, and also, keeping current with continuing education. But I keep talking about the integrator thing, but whenever, we move every 3 years. And so getting to know people every 3 years is kind of a challenge, because you're rotating in and out. You have other staff that are rotating in and out. And there's, the civilian staff is kind of the backbone of each facility. Those are the people that have been there. They've kind of seen how the facility has matured over time, and kind of has seen people come and go, and they kind of keep it moving forward. And so being a pharmacist, we reach out and we touch everything. And whether it's in a medical center or an outpatient clinic, we're involved in pretty much everything that happens to a patient. So it's easy to kind of start to learn and understand and meet people, just because of our role. But on a daily basis, it would be interacting with a significant number of people outside of the profession of pharmacy. And that's a good story to take back to Afghanistan. The role for a pharmacist in Afghanistan is really dependent on the person who was in the role. And so there were staff that went there and they stayed in the pharmacy. They did their inpatient and ICU work, and then really never got involved with a more hands-on approach. I was there there's one of the pharmacists that was there at the time, and we were really like, no, we want to become a part of the trauma team. Our experience and our knowledge is valuable to the team. We can contribute, and we earned the trust of the team. And so that's why we were there. We were welcome to be there, and probably progressing towards a role pharmacist doesn't typically have in those settings, but you're deployed, things are happening, and you need to get the job done. And so being a part of that team is really, really rewarding, but also, probably the best job I'll ever have as a pharmacist. I'll tell you that, because, the direct impact you had, but also the experience. But, you get to meet people and you get to work in a team. So it's incredible.
I really like your the fact that you were very involved in pharmacy. Like, we are constantly telling all of the students who are coming in, the students who are applying, that pharmacy as a profession itself has changed from the time that I've started school, even to the time that these students are starting school and that they're graduating. Especially with COVID, we found that a lot of people realize how much more we can do, that we are trained in so much more than just, putting pills in a bottle, and that we can do so much more. So it's been very enlightening, I think, for a lot of people who aren't familiar with what we do. And I love that we're getting out there, and I love that people are like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And I'm like, yes, I can actually take your blood pressure. That is something I could do. And it just kind of makes me laugh, because I think we're just kind of almost like the gremlins in the cave that nobody really knows about. Pharmacy's always in the basement. we just magically appear with your drugs. But so kind of along the topic of COVID, so how has your position changed with COVID? It is very, it's been a year. It's our, the year anniversary of it. So how has your position changed?
So absolutely. So the Defense Health Agency, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of, focused on standardizing across the services from a medical perspective. And so a year ago, when COVID started, that obviously didn't derail everything, but certainly became a back burner priority to what was happening to our DoD, Department of Defense beneficiaries. And so the focus, the DHA then had a larger role in the COVID response from a DoD perspective. And so much to the fact that now the DHA was tapped to lead the vaccination effort. And so for the millions of beneficiaries that we have in DoD, the DHA is managing vaccine, where it's going, how it's getting there. And so making sure that, we have, fair and equitable access across the board. And so that has been probably the biggest culmination of events over the past year. Little by little, the DHA was pulled in to do more and more and more. And so my role has changed from focusing on, the standardization piece is what we're all about. And now it's like, okay, well, now we're all about COVID, right? And that's kind of the more important piece. And so from a workplace environment, it didn't change my life too much. I was still coming to work, but from a focus on my day-to-day, it completely shifted 100%.
Wow. So are you still focusing on vaccines? I know a lot of like bases overseas are having difficulties getting the vaccine. So is that still a major part of your day, or are you slightly transitioning back to more of like that strategy part?
So slowly but surely, the transition and the priorities of the DHA are coming back.
Okay.
But right now the focus is really primarily on the vaccination piece, as that is essentially, the next step to progressing past the pandemic.
Yeah. Have you gotten opportunities to vaccinate, or are you just doing the?
So right now I have not, unfortunately, because the role I'm in, but I will tell you, there are pharmacists in the Navy and the Air Force and the Army that are deploying in support of FEMA's mission throughout the country. And so there are vaccination teams that are pharmacists and pharmacy technicians that are involved in that effort. Just not me right
That's
now.
what I want to do. I would do that. Oh yes, my absolute favorite part, and I joke about it, but it's true. I love vaccinations. I think it is so much fun. I joke that I stab people for a living, and it goes over well most of the time. But I love the vaccination efforts, and it's been such a cool. I think it's such a cool opportunity as a student. Like, who else gets to say that they went to school during a pandemic and got to vaccinate? So
well, and it's another avenue to kind of demonstrate the value we could provide.
Exactly. See, like I said, everyone knows us now.
Yeah.
But yeah. So how do you see your role evolving in the future? Is this something that you're going to stay with? Is this something that, at the end of your time in DC, you'll leave your project behind, or will you continue working on this?
So this is something that, the DHA, once you're assigned to the DHA, you eventually go back to the Navy. So I will, return to the Navy in one form or fashion, likely the next year and a half. And what that role will look like, I'm still trying to figure out. But there are a lot of opportunities out there, not only from a pharmacy perspective, but from a leadership perspective as well. So I'm excited to see what's next. But I'll continue my Navy career. Looking forward to seeing what's next.
There we go. And so my last, and this is my favorite question to ask, is what is your biggest advice for our incoming students? Like, if you could tell this freshman student, what would your advice be for them?
Oh, that's a very good question. And so I think it's don't marry into one practice of pharmacy too soon, and understand that it's going to change for you, not only by the time you graduate or work your way through pharmacy school, but even after you graduate. You may find out, like, I didn't do inpatient my entire, 6 years in pharmacy school. And then I started doing inpatient. Like, I love inpatient. I didn't even know. And so it's important to not only focus on, learning, get the clinical piece down, live your life, enjoy your college experience, but don't marry into one specific part of pharmacy too soon, because it's going to continue to change. Graduating pharmacy from pharmacy school is just the beginning. Some people think it's the end. Oh, I'm done. I can go do my thing, and this is what I'll do for the rest of my life. But no, it actually only gets a little bit more complex as time goes on, because you're starting to realize, like, oh, I can have this impact, or I can do this. It's like, I didn't even think of that before. And so your career will change over time. So keep the aperture open and continue to learn.